So hello, my name is Kelly O'Dowd and I'm the Development Manager for Relate NI. And Relate NI is the largest relationships charity within Northern Ireland. And our mission is to make expert information and advice available to sustain healthy relationships in Northern Ireland and all types of healthy relationships as well. So we do know that relationships are of vital importance to our well-being. There's been lots of research carried out over the past 80 years, which I'm going to tell you a wee bit more detail about later on. But they're of vital importance to our well-being and one of our most important assets. We know that healthy relationships can actually shield us from the effects of long-term health conditions and aid our recovery and even prevent illness in the first place. And conversely, we also know that poor quality relationships are risk factors of poor health and well-being. And that's why we think relationships are so important. And I suppose when we think about relationships, many people think automatically they go to romantic relationships, but we're relational animals and we have relationships with all types of people. So we may be in a romantic relationship, we may have friends, friendships, or family members, we have work colleagues, people we encounter maybe in the post office or someone we buy coffee from, strangers that we maybe meet on the bus or the train or in the park when we're walking our dog. And we also know a lot of research has come out recently around the dangers of loneliness and isolation, and certainly we would have seen that during the pandemic as well. But the research is now telling us that loneliness and isolation can take up to 15 years off our lives, which is the same as being morbidly obese or smoking 20 cigarettes a day. So, we can't emphasize enough the importance of healthy relationships. So we're going to talk a wee bit about, I suppose, the nuts and bolts of what healthy relationships actually look like and how we can cultivate those relationships more effectively. So I got my hands on this book just before the summer. And it's called The Good Life and How to Live It. And I'd actually watched Robert Waldinger, his TED Talk on the good life. So from that TED Talk, and it's one of the most watched TED Talks, and I would absolutely advise you to watch it as well. But they have created this book, and it's the world's longest study on happiness. And the key learning out of this book is the happiest and the healthiest are those who had the warmest connections and relationships to others. So if we look back, I suppose they started researching young men, essentially, when they were about 15, 16, right up till they were in their 80s and 90s. And they were saying, what has made your life the happiest? Is it the wonderful career? Is it the accolades? Is it the things that you bought? And they found that absolutely was the opposite case. That they find that these people were physically stronger and they had sharper brains, that they had less physical and mental ill health, and that was linked to their ability to regulate stress. So because of these warm connections and the relationships that they had, if they were having a stressful day, they had someone to, talk to decompress with, and it moved them out of that fight or flight response. And that fight or flight response is a stress response, but other people help us regulate that in terms of healthy relationships and warm connections. So if we look at, stress factors, there's plenty of stress factors, I suppose, in our society. But one of the biggest stress factors could be conflict within our relationships, conflict within the workplace. It can be extremely stressful. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis at the minute. And, as a wise woman once said to me, when poverty walks in the door, love jumps out the window. So when we have less resources, then that can cause stress in relationships as well. Bereavement, and we do know, bereavement is not a linear process. Someone loses someone and, they have a period of time of grieving and then they get over it. Bereavement can hit people like a bus. They have good days, they have bad days, but it certainly can cause stress on relationships as well. Life changes, or as we call them in Relate, transitions. So we would see a lot of people getting in contact with us in terms of transitions in their own lives. So it could be new babies, it could be divorce, it could be retirement, it could be unemployment, it could be change in family size, change in family circumstances, but certainly life changes can cause stress factors. Loneliness, we've already touched upon in terms of people not being able to socially connect. Their world gets smaller, they become more isolated, and that can have a detrimental impact and cause stress in relationships as well. And then mental health issues. If we have existing mental health issues, they can be exacerbated as well, causing stress and anxiety. So what do healthy relationships look like? We talk a lot about, I suppose, and I'm sure you've heard it as well, about relationship red flags and behaviour that's not appropriate in relationships. Well, we think it's important to look at key tips and tools that we have for relationship green flags. So what are the things that are cultivate good, healthy relationship practices? Well, genuine apologies. Sometimes everybody makes mistakes, but can we genuinely apologize and say that we're sorry for causing hurt and pain to someone else? Do we actively listen? And active listening is very different than hearing. It's about hearing something. It's about processing. It's about communicating and then, summarizing and reflecting back to a person. Are we able to accept another's feelings, even if we're not comfortable with those feelings? And are we able to take responsibility for our actions, for things that we've done? Are we able to say, actually, I'm responsible for that? Do we show others respect? Does it really matter to us how we make other people feel? And do we look to find solutions instead of blaming someone? So it's not who's wrong, it's actually what's wrong and how can it be fixed? Can we ensure that others feel safe to express their feelings, or do they feel that they're afraid of upsetting us or making us angry so that they're not able to express their feelings? And that's about emotional regulation that we need to look at and concentrate on. And words and actions must align. If we say something, as we say, can you walk the walk and talk the talk? Just because you say something, but you don't act out what you've actually said, then that can cause trust in a relationship as well, and it's not a green flag. And also, we're not afraid of hard conversations, because through hard conversations, we're able to learn and we're able to grow. So when I started researching a lot of this stuff, I looked to an institute called the Gottman Institute. You can look it up, Gottman, the Gottman Institute. And the Gottmans have spent 50 years actually looking at couples. But I suppose the learning from couples is like any relationship. And they talk about a model they use called the Sound Relationship House. So what they did was they got a number of couples into what they called a love lab, and they observed their behaviours. And what they were able to do over a period of time is to tell with 90% accuracy which couples were going to stay together and which couples were going to split up. And what they found was the key to a lot of those healthy relationships was the ability to manage conflict effectively. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through what the Gottmans saw in their love lab for couples who were able to manage conflict effectively. So since we can't avoid it, and conflict is nature's primary motivator for change, how was the Grand Canyon created? It was created a conflict between rock and water. How are beautiful pearls created? It's conflict between an oyster and a grain of sand, and the oyster's trying to get rid of that grain of sand. So it's not what conflict will inevitably happen, but it's how we deal with it that's the most important thing. So the Gottmans tell us that when we're dealing with conflict, we need to address conflict at the right time and the right place. And that may not necessarily be just after the issue has just happened. So it may not be in a car park or a wedding or in the supermarket, but we address it when both people are feeling emotionally regulated, that we're not in that fight or flight feeling within our bodies. They also tell us to focus on one issue at a time. And a big issue that I will see with people managing conflict is that they will start throwing in other things that have happened from previous experiences or from before. So I was delivering this workshop out in the community, and one of the participants said to me, "Oh, you want to see my mum and dad go at it?" My mum will say to my dad, "Oh, you left those dirty dishes at the side of the sink." And he'll say, "What about 1984? What about 1992? And what about 2006? So when we start putting other issues in on top of that conflict, it becomes really muddied. It becomes very difficult to deal with. So we need to focus on one issue at a time. We need to start the conversation with something positive, because if we start the conversation with something negative, it's kind of a negative spiral. It will go into a spiral in effect. So if we can start the conversation with something positive to say, "Look, I'm really sorry we had this argument," or "I'm really sorry that we have fallen out. I really hope that we can resolve this issue." What the Gottmans saw, and the key to this, was that people spoke in that "I feel." So I feel angry, I feel upset, I feel confused, I feel embarrassed, not "you are, you always, you never." So if someone starts saying to you, you're always late, you're never early, you never tidy up, that can feel that we're being attacked. And if we feel we're being attacked, it's very easy then to go on the defense. So own the emotion. So I feel angry, I feel upset that the dishwasher wasn't emptied. I need you to empty the dishwasher. And that's what the Gottmans saw. They saw a person speaking in the "I feel," but they also saw them giving their partner a positive statement in terms of what it is that they needed from their partner. They also tell us, don't drag up other issues or incidents. Start here and start now. And many people will say to me, well, but there's lots of issues and incidents that need to be dealt with. Well, you have to do them one at a time. That's what the Gottmans tell us, because we're not going to resolve conflict any other way. I think when we're in a conflict situation or an argument, we know that we're right because we see it from our perspective. But imagine what it looks like for someone else. So, we've heard, don't judge my actions till you've walked a mile in my footsteps. You're very clear about what your understanding of the argument or the conflict has been. But do we look at it from the other person's perspective? And the way that we do that is to listen to the person, to create a safe space for them to be able to express their emotions and their feelings and their understanding of what has happened. And then what we do is summarize what they have said. So what I'm hearing from you is you are angry or you're upset that the dishwasher wasn't emptied. Tell me a wee bit more about that. Tell me why you're angry, or tell me why you're upset. So we're seeking clarification, and we're affirming feelings, and we're listening, and we're reflecting. We're not jumping ahead, and we're not adding other things into the argument. And affirming feelings is so important as human beings. Affirming feelings is, I see you and I hear you. We're not advising people. We're not problem solving. We're not telling them what it is that they think. We're basically saying, I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. I see you. Please talk to me and let's try and resolve this issue. So they also say, don't advise or try to solve problems. Well, I could give advice if I was in a situation, but doesn't necessarily maybe be the right advice. And if we try to solve problems for people all the time, what happens the next time they come up with a problem? So we need to help them solve problems as well. But it's about effective listening. If we feel we're getting nowhere in the conflict, we can agree to postpone an argument, especially if we're feeling emotionally dysregulated. If we feel we're moving into that fight or flight mode, we can say, look, I think, we should leave it for half an hour or an hour, go and have a walk, go and decompress, read a book, have a cup of tea, and then maybe come back to the discussion. And what we really want to do is work towards a compromise. It's a win-win for both parties, not a win-lose. Winning and losing are for football games or for competitive sports, but in relationships, we want both people to feel that they've gained something from the interaction. So the Gottmans talk about our sound relationship house, and you can have a wee look that up if you want to. But they also talk about the 4 levels of destructive behaviours in relationships, or as they like to call them, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which I think is quite appropriate. So they talk about criticism. So you're always late, you're never early. So how we combat that is that I feel angry, I feel upset that, we're late again, or that we haven't made it on time to do ABC or XYZ. In terms of disrespect, this can be sarcasm, it can be eye-rolling, and what the Gottmans talk about is creating a climate that is a climate of appreciation in our relationships. So thank you for picking up the post, thank you for taking the dog for a walk, thank you for emptying the dishwasher, thank you for putting the bins out, so that we're looking at each other and saying, you're important to me. I recognize I'm validating that you're in this relationship with me, and that we're doing things to create a climate of appreciation within this relationship. The 3rd horseman of the apocalypse is defensiveness. So it's not my fault. And once we say it's not my fault, what we're actually saying is, if it's not my fault, it must be your fault. So the Gottmans advise us to take some kind of responsibility, even a small part of responsibility for what has happened. So I'm sorry, I didn't realize you needed that information earlier, or I'm sorry I didn't tell you this part of ABC or XYZ. So it's accepting some responsibility because, there's 2 people in a conflict or an argument or a discussion. So it's about taking some responsibility. And the 4th level then is stonewalling. So if we feel that we've become emotionally overwhelmed, we just shut down. And it means that you don't want to hear and that you don't want to speak. And the Gottmans advise then we take a break again from the discussion, and then we come back to it again when we're feeling emotionally regulated. So the Gottmans also give advice for 3 steps to a long-term happy partnered life. So they talk about fighting fairly. So we've just looked at our conflict resolution model, which is listen for understanding. So we're not in this discussion so that you can hear what it is that I have to say. What I'm trying to get is to understand where you're coming from. Speak to be heard, which means clear and effective communication. So you need to understand how you feel, what you want, and to be able to communicate that to our partner. And we need to self-soothe. And that means not being in that fight or flight mode, that we are feeling emotionally calm and emotionally regulated. We need to strengthen ourselves. And there are 2 things we need to do there. And that's surviving and thriving. So for me, surviving is going to bed at a regular time. It means eating good, healthy food. It means getting some exercise. And that makes me feel good as a human being. That's the surviving. In terms of thriving then, what do I do that excites me? What do I do at the weekends? Go for a long walk, make some lovely Sunday dinner, maybe go out and see a film. Those are the things that help me thrive. So, you know, when you're on an airplane and they say, please fit your oxygen mask first before you fit anyone else's. If you're not strong and strengthen yourself, then how can we give to another relationship? How can we give to another person? And then the third step they advise is to strengthen our relationship is to share a hobby and an interest. What is it that you can do with a friend or a family member or a partner that bonds you, that brings you together, but is out of the ordinary? It's not doing the same things all the time. Notice the good things that your partner does, and that's back to creating that climate of appreciation. What are the good things that they do? What are the small things that they notice or that they do for you that are important? And the big thing is to laugh together. What is it that makes you laugh? Why are you in this relationship in the first place? What first attracted you to your partner in the first place? And find out what makes you laugh and try and laugh together as often as you can. So feelings and emotions can be difficult, and we've talked about them in terms of fight or flight and our stress responses. But what we need to do is create a small piece of space between what we feel and how we action that. So Susan David has written a book on emotional agility. She is a South African psychiatrist. Her father got terminally ill when she was about 12 or 13 years of age. And she started going into school every day. And her teacher said, you know, how are you feeling today? So she had good days and she had bad days. And her teacher had advised her then to start journaling and writing out her feelings. Excuse me. So she became a lifelong enthusiast in terms of studying emotions and studying feelings. And she talks about emotional agility, which is creating a small space between how we feel and how we act, not react. So I am feeling angry, not I am angry, because we're not the emotion. I am feeling angry, I am feeling upset, I am feeling happy, I am feeling surprised. But she says, feel the feeling, but don't become the emotion. Witness it, allow it, and release it. And that's about emotional regulation, and that's about emotional self-control as well. But we really need to think about which are harder to express, our feelings or our emotions. And then tips for managing our emotions. And I suppose I've done a few of these already, but positive thinking, it may come as a surprise to you, because it certainly did to me, that we have more negative emotions than we have positive emotions. But we have more negative emotions because that's what keeps us safe as a species. So